Good evening. I will call to order the City Council workshop for June 10th, 2024. Ms. Rush, if you'll do the roll call. Mayor Simpson. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Morgan.
Here.
Councilmember Ambrose. Councilmember Davis.
Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Pfeiffer.
I'll move to excuse Councilmember Ambrose from tonight's workshop.
Thank you. All votes are cast. That passes 6-0. Councilmember Ambrose is in excused absence this evening. So before we begin, I want to note that we had a fairly eventful week. Last week, we had a notable event here in our city. It is not common that you have a plane crash in the middle of a Thursday morning, but that is where or a Friday morning, but that is where we found ourselves. First, I want to send my sympathies to the victims of that incident. I'm sure it was incredibly scary, and my thoughts, our thoughts and prayers are with that family in this difficult time. I also want to extend my sincerest, most heartfelt, tremendous commendations to our first responders. We train for these kinds of crazy events. You never think you're going to have a plane crash in the middle of a residential neighborhood, but there we were on Oberon Street and Oberon Road, and our first responders were not just our APD and our AFD, who performed tremendously, to huge credit to all of them as professionals. But our streets team also was actually amongst the very first on the scene because they were the closest. So different members of our streets unit helped with that early response before our police and fire were able to arrive, in addition to the pedestrians who were in the neighborhood and came out to help. They didn't flee, they served as heroes. So we will be doing a recognition more officially later, but I wanted to open the comments with just commending each and every one of them for their actions and their heroism when crisis came to our city, and their extremely professional and dedicated response throughout the entire crisis. I know it's helped the federal lead for these investigations quite significantly. So congratulations to all of them, and thank you significantly. So with that, I will open the first workshop this evening. We have a 2024 legislative session review. I see Jennifer Kessel and Mr. Ed Bowditch here with us. They are from Castle Public Affairs to provide, and I will let the team go ahead and introduce this item.
Thank you so much for the invitation to come out tonight and for the privilege of representing the city of Arvada. Jennifer's saving her voice tonight, is in recovery mode, but she will let me do most of the talking. First of all, thank you all for your efforts as we got through the 2024 legislative session. It was truly a team effort, both with the members of the city and the administrative staff who came down to testify, CML, our legislative delegation, and there's a lot of work that goes into getting things done at the Capitol. This year, the session ended just about a month ago, and as you can see, just as background, as the session was January 10th to May 8th. The Democrats controlled the Senate 23-12 and had the Democrats had their highest majority ever at 46-19 in the House. It was the most diverse legislature in terms of age, race, gender, however you want to look at it. And this year, 525 bills were passed out of 705. And a majority of those that passed were bipartisan. A lot of those don't get the notoriety that probably they should, but the legislature really works in a bipartisan manner in many of the bills that are adopted. If you were to talk about any of the themes this year, first one I'd say is we love to vote in this state, and a lot of things don't get resolved in the state capitol, they get deferred to the ballot. And this year was no exception to that. There will be a number of items that we'll get into a little later that will appear on the November ballot. Some of the big policy bills we'll talk about as well, and as I mentioned, a bipartisan theme this year, probably more than most years. In terms of winners and losers, there are more and more tax credits this year than prior years. Governor Polis has not been a fan of tax credits in the past. Governor Polis has said, let's get rid of as many tax credits and deductions as we can and lower the rates, so everyone is paying a much lower rate. But this year, even the governor's office They were proposing tax credits. We'll have a summary of some of those later on. Transit dollars, we wouldn't have anticipated this at the beginning of the session, but by the end of the session, there's more money flowing to transit. A focus on air quality, and really a focus on productivity this year. Depending on your perspective, you can say too much got done or not enough got done, but they didn't kill a lot of bills this year. Some of the losers, I'd say construction defects. There's no change in the construction defects law, despite a lot of work going into that, and a lot of the messaging bills that frankly are usually introduced just to put somebody on the record. Those tend to flame out pretty quickly. As we look to the state budget, I won't go over every line in the state budget. The long bill, House Bill 1430, passed. The big focus this year was eliminating the budget stabilization factor in K-12 education, hopefully forever. So now some people say we have fully funded K-12 education. More accurate description would be we are now funding K-12 education at the minimally required constitutional amount. But we have no budget stabilization factor. Hopefully that's gone forever. More money for preschool. Higher ed tuition increases were capped at 3% for resident students. And then there was some other funding for mental health and so on. If you look at the inflation rate in Colorado, it's coming down, though we're still above the national inflation rate. Colorado's economy seems to be strong, and that's probably propping up our own local inflation rate a little bit, but things continue to come down. And our general fund in the state continues to go up, though at a slightly reduced rate. That is mostly personal income tax collections. Some state sales taxes are in there as well, but most of what you see up there reflects personal income tax payments. We will get our next revenue estimate a week from Thursday. Jennifer and I will send out a brief summary of what that looks like after the June 20th revenue estimate. Moving on to some of the specific policy bills this year. As I mentioned, there were a lot of tax credits this year. Now, tax credits in Colorado, unlike any other state, Colorado is capped in its revenues by the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Right as of March, we were expected to have a Tabor refund, those revenues collected above the state's limit, of $1.9 billion. And that's one reason that has led to so many legislators and the governor's office pursuing tax credits. We're going to give the money back anyway. So let's, according to many of the legislators who support these tax credits, let's try and incent some positive social change, however your perspective may be, to implement some change by rewarding tax credits. Supporting various economic development efforts like supporting the quantum industry. Help with family affordability. That one is a $600 million tax credit for families can receive if the families are low income on a per child basis. Protecting housing for seniors. We've had the senior homestead exemption for those seniors who are 65 and up who have lived in their homes for 10 years, but if a senior has downsized or moved for a medical reason or moved for whatever reason, they can get this tax credit because they don't qualify for the senior homestead exemption at that point. The tax credits were almost all signed by the governor, the ones that passed, which is a big change in prior years when he would only approve a few of them. So that's one big change that we've seen this year.
Mr. Bowditch, I have a quick question. In terms of the Help with Family Affordability Tax Credit, you noted that it is for low-income individuals. Has the state established a threshold for that? Because I know, for instance, if you are Medicaid, it's quite low versus for housing, if you're Freddie and Fannie Mae at the federal level, it's about $100,000 considering the wealth of this market. So I'm curious as to what the threshold is.
I know that there is a threshold, but I can't remember what it is. I seem to recall $60,000 or $70,000, but I don't know if that's for all family sizes or if that's where it phases out.
Okay,
but it's prioritized at lower income families. I just can't remember what the threshold is.
Thank you.
Yeah. Property tax seems to be the recurring issue. So the Gallagher Amendment passed in 1982. It was repealed in 2020. Since then, you can see on the timeline, it has been a recurring issue every year, it seems. A year ago, the legislature passed Senate Bill 303 in the last few days of the legislative session. That led to Proposition HH being placed on the ballot, which was soundly defeated. The governor called the special session in late November. Out of that came the property tax task force that met throughout the session. And out of that came Senate Bill 233 in this session. Unlike Senate Bill 303 last year, Senate Bill 233 had broad support. There was only one no vote in the House, and I think only 2 or 3 no votes in the Senate. Had broad support, and frankly, the Democratic leadership really worked hard to make sure they were engaging all of their colleagues on that. So Senate Bill 233 passed. That is an effort to stabilize the property tax system, and hopefully, I don't want to say simplify the property tax system, because now it looks like this, where we used to have a very easy residential, non-residential, 2 rows of property taxes. Now we have many different things. Really, this looks pretty complicated, but really focus on the first couple of rows at the top. You can see the years going across the top, and the first thing that Senate Bill 233 did was say, whatever we did in 2023, we're going to do in 2024. We're going to keep the assessment rates the same for every class. So the 2023 law came out of that special session, but they carried that over to 2024. The next thing they did, the next big change, was to separate schools out on the residential side, so that if they want to give a break to taxpayers on the residential side, it doesn't apply to what they pay to schools, so the state won't have to backfill to the schools. That is something that a lot of people don't understand, that there aren't any state property taxes. The only linkage to property taxes is that linkage with school finance. That the less property tax that's collected at the local level, schools have to backfill.
Councilmember Marriott.
So the question I have on this chart, it appears to me that for 2025 and forward, the legislature actually raised the assessment going to schools when compared to 23 and 24. Because it was every part of it was 6.7, and now it'll be 7.5 for that half of it, and then the other half will change to that. So they didn't really cut anything. They raised it on one side and reduced it slightly on the other side.
In response, I'd say depends where you live, because the value exemption that you see, the $55,000, will mean one thing in a higher home value neighborhood than it does in eastern Colorado. But it will affect different people differently. Right. And your point is well taken. Colorado, if you compare Colorado to other states, we currently have paid and will continue to pay much lower residential property tax rates, much higher commercial property tax rates. And the effort here, as you note, was really to drop the commercial property tax rate. And you can see in that commercial improved line going from 27.9 minus 30,000, which is not much of a decrease, down to 25 in 2 years. That's, I think, about a 14% decrease in the 2 years. And so that will be something that will be significant for commercial property owners.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Moving on to other issues. At this point, I will introduce my friend Jennifer in just a minute. I will say that this was probably the big issue that stretched over the full 120 days. After last year's failure of the governor's large bill, there were multiple bills this year. And the first one up is the Transit-Oriented Communities 1313.
Thank you, Ed. Good to be here. Sorry for my voice. I apologize. Ed, I'm such a good partner. I got sick after the session.
Thank you.
Yes. Crazy. Excuse me. So as you all know, the big bill, as Ed mentioned, House Bill 1313, was discussed multiple times. I know we had a lot of conversations with our staff and our legislative delegation on this bill. Essentially what this bill now does after it went through the whole process and was heavily amended in many regards, is going to require those local governments with over 4,000 in population that are located in a metropolitan planning organization and that have a certain amount of transit in their communities to develop basically around transit-oriented, to create transit-oriented centers and then create these housing opportunity goals to try to increase density so that there's more density around transit in areas. The bill started out with a couple of sticks in the bill, so that if local governments did not do this and did not move forward with creating their HOGs, the housing opportunity goals, that they could risk losing HUTF funding, and DOLA could file an injunction against a local government. Those two sticks were removed from the bill. They were removed in the Senate. There was big pushes to get those pieces taken out, but eventually, big coalition of folks were successful in removing the sticks. There are carrots in the bill, tax credits, so there will be a tax credit. It didn't pass in 1313. It passed in another bill that will give tax credits to developers that do develop along these transit areas. A lot of flexibility was added to the bill to where local government can choose their transit-oriented centers. They are allowed to designate those areas that they want. It could just be one if they wanted to. Then local communities are going to have to zone for for an average of 40 units. And I imagine the city will have to do some work to meet this requirement. I imagine there could be some conversations with staff on how to best do that moving forward. One interesting aspect, historic districts were not excluded in this bill. However, any kind of rezoning in historic districts will have to follow those historic district requirements. So that would apply to downtown Arvada, which is a good thing. So, I think that is about all for that bill. But essentially, at the end, in the last couple of days of getting this bill through, a lot of concessions were made. Still a lot of flexibility is provided, even for local governments where they do choose to put these transit centers. If there's not enough water or other utilities, you don't have to approve that zoning or approve any kind of development or whatnot. So again, still a lot of flexibility, no sticks in this bill, some incentives as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Thank you, and thank you for the explanation of that. And I think probably you started answering my question, and I'm guessing that we're going to need to spend more time with our staff to dive deeper into this. But my question is, what does Arvada have to do specifically to comply? And so you did kind of give a high-level view of that, and I appreciate that. But maybe my request is to our city team to get a little more deep dive briefing at some point about what we're going to have to do to comply. So thank you.
You're welcome.
We're putting it on the schedule.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask you one other question about housing issues? Wasn't there a bill that removed the local government's ability to dictate parking requirements?
Yes, and I believe we're going to talk about
that's
that bill
coming.
here.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, got it. Sounds good, thank you.
Yes. Expanding of the affordable housing tax credit that's administered by the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. That frankly is something that most everyone agrees is the best way to provide affordable housing, is to give those developers some sort of a tax credit. And then they won't just build market rate condos and apartments. That was passed. Another one that was passed early on was House Bill 1007 prohibiting residential occupancy limits. I think this was a bigger deal in places like Fort Collins and Boulder, the college towns, and some other areas as well. But this bans local governments from enforcing occupancy limits for non-related residents, except to regulate safety and health. Air quality was a major focus this year. Later in the session, there was a long, starting at the bottom of the page, there were a number of bills that were introduced early in the session. The governor's office pulled together a number of environmental organizations, oil and gas, and they negotiated. And finally, measures were pulled off stopped from pursuing the ballot, and the groups agreed to pass Senate Bills 229 and 230. 229 on ozone mitigation, and 230 establishing new fees on oil and gas production that will fund transit, wildlife corridors, and so on. This is one where, frankly, I think cooler heads prevailed, and luckily we won't have a big fight about this on the ballot. Gun control comes up every year. This year was kind of a different tune, as the U.S. Supreme Court has said governments can regulate guns in sensitive spaces. Colorado attempted to define sensitive spaces, and this prohibits the carrying of firearms in the General Assembly, local governments, educational institutions, and so on. This bill did pass. I believe local governments can opt out of that if they want. It is the state government will likely be getting sued over this bill, the state legislature. I don't know if that lawsuit's been filed, not yet or not, but. In terms of specific bills that we took positions on, Jen mentioned the housing and transit-oriented communities. We were in an amend position. This bill was signed. The ADU we were monitoring. That one made it through. And Senate Bill 174, the Sustainable Affordable Housing Assistance, this one passed with large majorities. This one was sponsored in part by Senator Zenzinger from our delegation. Really moves to DOLA to work with local communities on the longer-term housing issues about housing plans, and does provide DOLA with some money to do that. Anything else? Looking at some law enforcement issues, regulating law enforcement use of prone restraint in 1372. This is one we were in an amend position. It was amended, but we never moved off that amend position. So it was kind of, I don't want to say dialed back, but yeah, I guess it was dialed back a bit. It was dialed back a bit, and then it made it through. The other one up here, 1460, boy, was that a big battle at the last few days of the session. We were opposed to the bill. It died after a lengthy debate on a 31 to 33 vote on the House floor. This one would have provided additional protections for whistleblowers and prohibiting certain things among law enforcement. It was a big fight. I'm certain this one will be back next year.
And I will just say Chief Brady and Aaron Jacks were heavily involved in both of these bills. They came to the Capitol and were in many stakeholder meetings, testified, et cetera, on these. So they were very much involved in this. So the city of Arvada certainly contributed to the success of where we got to with these two bills.
Yep. 1173, I might turn this back to you.
Yes. For some reason, EV charging stations turned into be a little bit of a battle down at the Capitol. This one also went until the last day. We did take an opposed position. This bill in its original form, when it was introduced, would have required local governments to adopt the Colorado Energy Office's model code on electric vehicle charging systems. That code is not in place, so we actually don't know what that code is currently. And we do already have a code for EV charging systems. So we did oppose that bill. Not that we're opposed to EV charging stations, but not to have to be mandated to do that. Eventually, a long process, this bill did get amended to where it is going to provide some reporting and data for local governments, some technical assistance. It does require CEO to adopt this model code in 2025, and it does have an opt-out for those local governments who do already have a model code in place to opt out of having to adopt CEOs. So that was an amendment that we did, or that we were successful in getting on the bill that does provide us that flexibility with this one. Had many conversations with Representative Titone and Representative Doherty on this bill, and they were helpful to us on this one.
Moving on to 1239, the single exit stairway. Somebody thought this was a good idea because they do it in Europe. This would have required counties and municipalities to allow single exit stairway to serve up to 5 stories. When this bill was introduced, the first 3 rows of testimony were all the different fire agencies saying this is not a good idea. We cannot guarantee that we will be able to get people out in case of emergency. This bill lingered for a long time, but ultimately was killed in its first committee. Maybe in its first or second committee. But it was killed in its first house, I know that. 1090, I think you knew more about 1090 early in the session.
I did, and you know what I realized, well, maybe it is coming up. Yes, so 1090, so this was also a bill that developed early in the session that Aaron Jacks was heavily involved in as well, too. There was a bill that passed last session aiming to redact certain record information from child victims. We did support that bill last year, and it did pass. However, there was a little tweak that needed to be made in that bill that we didn't catch until after the fact. It essentially wouldn't have allowed us to access that information after all. So we needed to run House Bill 1090 to correct that. So this passed very early on in the session, and as you can see, it was definitely supported. And we did end up eventually supporting the bill rather than the amend position. We just wanted to make sure that the language was correct, that anyone involved in these criminal justice cases would receive that information.
And one that were not able to stop was Senate Bill 194, introduced late in the session, repeals the local government's authority to collect impact fees for fire districts and allows a fire and ambulance district to go to the voters for a sales tax and collect their own impact fees. We were opposed to that. A lot of the local governments were opposed, and the firefighters won the day on that one. We talked about Senate Bill 106 that we supported. This one did not make it through both houses on right to remedy and construction defects. There were a lot of people involved in this bill, but it came down to a large battle, and the bill did not make it through. Before we get to that, I wanted to mention the parking, because we did not have that. Yeah. There was a bill to prohibit local governments from mandating minimum parking for either development, for any sort of development that goes on, and that bill passed. The specifics.
Yep. So it right now only applies to mixed-use developments with 50% or more would have to be residential. So that was something that the business community pushed, so that the parking minimums would apply more to residential buildings rather than commercial buildings. But it's be a mixed use with 50% or more.
So tell me
Mr. Marriott, I apologize. There are other lights on. All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Well, I'll defer to Councilmember Marriott because he has a question on this, and I have a question on a different bill. So
Okay,
I'm
thank
happy
you.
to-
And Mr. Pfeiffer, is your question about parking?
It is.
Okay, then Ms. Pfeiffer, then Mr. Marriott.
So you said a couple different things. I'm thinking land use in my head. Is it on mixed-use zoning?
Yes, or
Okay.
no, I'm sorry, mixed-use buildings or readaptive buildings. So moving from commercial to residential buildings.
Because I think in ours, in our mixed use, the residential is an exception, right? We don't have the right people here. So that would be the major modification. So we would be all commercial. I guess we'll find out more when you get to that workshop. But I was just kind of curious because our zoning is probably a little bit different. I wonder how that impacts us. Because everything is primary commercial, and then our major modification is based on how much residential we allow on that commercial property.
Okay.
Which if it's 50%, then I would assume we can stay underneath that, and that would change the parking requirement. I guess more to come. It's new news. Okay, that was my
Yeah.
question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marriott, have at it.
I was going to ask for clarification on that. So the local government's not allowed to impose parking standards on anything that's under 50 units or over 50 units? I don't understand which way.
At least, let me make sure I have it in here. At least 50% of those developments have to be residential.
I guess
So more
it must be dense. I don't understand what they're trying to take away the local government's land use control over requiring parking.
Yes,
But
correct.
they're not taking away our control for regulating parking over every development. It's just certain ones.
Correct.
And so which ones do we lose our ability to regulate the quantity of parking?
Right, I would say strictly residential, And then I would then assume those that are under 50% of residential, any mixed-use buildings under 50% of residential.
So of any size, someone wants to build a 4-unit apartment building, they can build it with no parking if they want.
I would assume so, yes.
And if,
Yeah.
and if they want to build a 300-unit
I know, now I'm
apartment building,
confusing
they can,
myself.
they want to build a 300-unit apartment building, they can build that with no parking if they so desire. Okay. Thank you.
For Ed and Jennifer, I would protect you guys from that question because the state should never be dealing with land use in the first place. So it's a new subject at the Capitol, right? So,
It is.
Very, very much new subject at the Capitol.
and it's very complex when you get to the local level.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. I actually have an additional follow-up on parking. Simply, is this within transit-oriented zones, or is this in all zoning across the city?
I think it's within all zoning in those municipalities that are within a metropolitan planning organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Thank you. So I did want to change gears. Back to the air bills. We had taken a position on House Bill 1341, which is the idling bill, and you didn't mention that, so I just wanted to
that's
call
right.
that to your attention.
Right, yes. We had taken a position of support on the idling bill. Thank you. There were a few others that didn't get on here. The idling bill that allows local governments to impose a different standard, a lower standard on idling, and that bill did pass.
Thank you.
Moving on from this section, you can see in the end, we ended up supporting a few bills, opposing 5, amending 4, and monitoring 2. Some of the positions on individual bills change as the bills change or as we get more information. If you look at it this way, there were 2 bills we supported, 1 of those passed, and then of the ones we opposed, 3 passed, 2 of them ended up getting killed. Looking at our local legislators, again, this is a little tough because sometimes it's a point of time when their vote is taken versus when our position is taken. But you can see the dark is voted with the delegation, voting with the city in effect, and the lighter color is not, both for Representatives Doherty and Senator Cutter, and then for Representative Tatone and Senator Zenzinger as well. Finally, we're entering the interim time period. We will have new committees this year, new summer interim committees, one on cell phone connectivity that I think is mostly focused on rural Colorado, but certainly not exclusively so. And then the other one that was approved is American Indian Affairs, particularly in child welfare. 2 bills were extended, 2 committees were extended, the Jail Standards Commission and the Treatment for Substance Use Disorders. And then we have the regular committees that meet by statute every year, Transportation, Agriculture, Water, and Wildfires, and we'll be watching all of them. As I said, we love to vote in this state. We'll be voting on a number of things this year. Some of these are referred measures from the legislature, such as the independent judicial discipline and the judicial retention deadline, a property tax exemption for veterans. The property tax revenue cap, this deserves a little more discussion. So the property tax bill that passed was developed in a negotiation trying to get the business organizations to withdraw their support for the 2 property tax measures they were pushing. One of them, Initiative 50, has been certified for the ballot. That imposes a 4% cap on property tax revenue annually. The other one, Initiative 108, right now is in the process of signature gathering. It's been approved for signature gathering. That would lower the assessment rates much further below the chart I showed you earlier, would result in a revenue loss of $3 billion to local governments statewide. And it says the state will backfill all those lost dollars. Now, to be fair, and I want to try and be impartial on this, be a great day to be a taxpayer in Colorado because your property taxes will decline under that 108. I have my doubts about whether the state could come up with $3 billion to backfill the loss in local revenues, but it says they would. So that one hasn't been certified to be on the ballot yet, and there's still time for more negotiation to go on. Obviously, Senate Bill 233 is signed and approved, but these negotiations oftentimes go up against a deadline of maybe late August. before they get finalized.
Quick question about that. Is the Joint Budget Committee weighed in on the state's ability to return $3 billion? Because I see a lot of crumbling roads and bridges where we could put that money to good use.
Wearing my old Joint Budget Committee hat, when I was on staff there in the 1990s, you could take all the money the state gives to higher education and all the money the state gives to human services, and you're still not at $3 billion. The state spends about $16 billion in general fund revenues each year. So to take $3 billion out of that would be a sizable chunk. You can't, it doesn't say you could use Tabor refunds to use as part of the $3 billion. I don't know if anybody's thought of that. We've had more years without Tabor refunds than we've had with Tabor refunds. So we'll see what the voters decide. That's just one of the many things that will be on the ballot. Right to bail, sports betting is not that significant. Right to abortion, that has been approved to be on the ballot. And a firearm sales tax that generated a lot of discussion at the Capitol. That was a referred measure to tax firearms to go for victim services and some health care.
Quick question on that cap. I want to go back to that for a minute. I want to make sure I understood it. So you had on the Tabor refunds, you showed that Senate Bill 24228 had a temporary reduction in income tax via these 10 years, roughly. So the income tax rate would be reduced from 4.4 to 4.25. In addition, it reduced the sales tax from 2.9 to 2.77. So when they propose that type of $3 billion, I know you mentioned it, but maybe something else comes out of it. Maybe it's some other formula that. Do they ever anticipate? This is why I don't always like the ballot initiatives. Is there any anticipation that they're counting for these reductions for 10 years that have passed? Probably not.
That is an excellent question, and that's above my pay grade. But there was a lot of discussion between the governor, Colorado Concern, and some other organizations that are pushing the ballot measures, trying to get them to withdraw it. Let's see what the legislature can come up with. It was hoped that 233 would be that vehicle. But what you were saying about the decrease in the income tax rate and Senate Bill 228 and the sales tax rate, that was a negotiation with the tax credits. That the governor said he'd let those tax credits go through so long as he was getting some of what he wanted of a reduction, a temporary reduction, and a fluctuation in the income and tax rate and the sales tax rate. This year, in terms of, in addition to all the lengthy ballot measures we'll have, all 65 members of the House will be up for election and half the Senate. We know we will have at least 16 new members of the legislature. We will be losing 16 members from the House. Some are term limited, some are running for other offices, some are not returning out of their own choice. The Senate, and there will be 8 new senators. Many of those will be some of those House members that are running. But there will be at least 16 members, probably about 20. There's usually about 20 to 23 new members of the legislature, brand new each year. Looking ahead, potentially increased discord in the legislature. We see some nastiness rear its ugly head once in a while. Rise of the advocacy organizations. There are more and more advocacy organizations. Jennifer and I have represented some of them. I don't mean to say that they are all necessarily bad. It is challenging to try and get the attention of legislators to represent their city, their county, their school district, when oftentimes those lobbyists and entities representing public organizations are dramatically outnumbered in the lobbying arena. But that's just the way things are right now. We'll see what happens in Governor Polis's last 2 years. Governor Polis has been more involved than any governor I've seen in the last 35 years at the legislature. He's in his last 2 years. There was a lot more independence by the legislature this year. I expect that to continue. Finally, again, we see a role of the ballot process. It used to be organizations would come to the Capitol, and if their bills would get defeated, they'd say, well, we'll take this to the voters. Now you have legislators who don't get what they want, and they work to get things on the ballot. So we'll continue to see lengthy ballots in Colorado. That concludes our formal report.
Mr. Marriott.
So I have a question for you. One of your first slides showed one of the new things, there's some new office in the state of, go back to one of your first, office of some climate justice or something.
Yes.
What was the title of them? Office of Health, Equity, and Environmental Justice.
Yes.
What in the world are they going to do?
I am not all that familiar with that office, but there has been a greater focus on where pollution and where health outcomes are, how are they hurting communities differently? And I imagine this office is working in that regard.
And so the $2.8 million that they're going to consume, I'm assuming that's this year, is that just all in staff and support and offices, or is that actually tied to an actual thing, or is this is just their overhead to exist?
I don't know specifically. 2.8 million, there must have been a bill to create that office, and it wasn't on something we were following.
Yeah. 2.8 million would only fund
Handful of
10 people for
Yeah.
2 years? I mean, it would.
That would be the first year cost, or 1 year cost, the 2.8 million that we have there.
Right,
But,
okay, okay. So more to be known on that as it develops. Let me ask you another question. So, and this is, I'm asking for your opinion, actually, on this, not so much as what happened, but I've heard from other local governments that there's some interest in suing the state over the state's foray into land use, into what's typically been local control issues, things like parking for new developments and zoning, what should be zoned what and whatnot. My other observation, obviously, is over the last couple of years, the state seems to be, or the state legislators seem to be much more comfortable in just stepping into the local government arena and saying, well, the air passes from here to there, so it's a matter of statewide control. We're taking control of this, and we're gonna tell you what to do. Are things like that, if local governments were to sue the state over things like that, is that effective in ways of communicating with legislators, or how do the legislators learn? I mean, you produced charts that showed how infrequently they take our position. They tend to be, lobbied, as you mentioned, heavier by special interest groups, and they get funded through them and lobbied by them and whatnot, and so they tend to take that side. Are lawsuits an effective way of kind of reaching them, or what is it? How would a local government like us that sees negative things being done to us by the legislature year after year, what's our effective way? Obviously, we've employed you guys to help us. We host our legislators. They still vote against us far more often than they vote with us. So, what do we do? Are lawsuits effective? And if not that, what?
Very open-ended question. I would say I'm not a big fan of suing the legislature. I don't think that is any way to improve the relationship in the long run. You do have certain powers as a home rule city, much more so than the counties have. Counties are an arm of the state government, but home rule cities have certain powers. On Senate Bill 233, the 5.5% annual revenue cap doesn't apply to home rule cities. So on that one, I think it's very clear that the cities do have more authority than sometimes people give them credit for. Some of the other things that if the city really feels strongly that as a home rule city, an encroachment on land use abilities, you could proceed in your own way and let the state sue you. Your larger question of working with the delegation, I don't want to say that just because that's what we do, but I do like having the breakfasts and the meetings and trying to have conversations with the legislators. I think that helps more than hurts. And the more we continue to do that, the more that our delegation knows that the city really cares about what goes on. I think they listen sometimes more so than it seems.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have other thoughts.
No, just two examples, just to mention briefly. In our conversations, Representative Doherty and Representative Tatone specifically, I know Chief Brady had many conversations with Representative Doherty, and she has certainly been our champion as it relates to criminal justice issues, public safety issues, law enforcement issues. And then having a conversation with Rep. Tatone on that EV charging station bill, she was one of, I think, only 3 Democrats to vote against it. And really, it was because the city opposed it, her county opposed it as well. So there certainly are sometimes very specific issues that we do get our delegation members to actually, or not, I shouldn't say actually, pardon me, to listen to our concerns on those pieces of legislation.
And sometimes they get a lot of heat for that from their
They do,
colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to have a couple of those examples of where it is, but when you look at the stats, it's
Yeah.
grim,
and
when
there
you
are
look at
some,
the actual statistics.
there are some examples of, on the opposite
Right.
as well, too.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Thank you. Again, appreciate the briefing this evening. I guess my one question that you haven't touched on, I hear rumors of a special session. Is that still moving in that direction that's going to happen, and what will that entail if so?
I wouldn't guess on a special session at this time. There could be, the only thing could be is if there is a different agreement reached on the property tax issues. But the state, I mean, a lot of Democrats were really mad that they got called into the special session in November. They said, we don't have a state property tax. Voters and citizens think it's a state issue, but it's really not. And if we come into special session, it just reinforces this notion that the legislature has this responsibility to deal with property taxes. So I'm always wrong on these things. At this point, I'm guessing no.
I hope you're not wrong.
Thank you. I have one final question. We didn't discuss ADUs as part of the land use bill. I would like a quick update on where that final position landed. For viewing audiences, Arvada does have an ADU ordinance already on the books. It's worked really, really well. It's been developed over many years. So curious what the state did and if there's an impact to us.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Madam Mayor, for coming down to testify on that bill. This bill was a little bit similar to the EV charging station bill. As you know, we do have an ADU policy in place. We did work with both the House and the Senate, more so on the Senate side, to try to get something similar, like an opt-out or a grandfathering into that bill, so that those local governments that have a policy in place could continue to keep their policy in place. We were not successful in that. There was just a big swell of support around that ADU bill. We were able to get a little bit of flexibility in that bill to where there is going to be a statewide ADU policy now. But we did get some flexibility on the size of ADUs, so it was reduced to 750 square feet. And then setbacks. A setback is either going to be 5 feet in the rear or follow the same setbacks as currently in place for a single-family zoning area in a local government, so.
Okay. Did they wind up doing any parking requirements for ADUs to be used as residential?
Oh goodness. I know that was discussed. I don't want to give a wrong answer, so I'll just say I don't know. I don't remember, but I know that it was heavily discussed as part of the ADU bill.
No worries.
Well-
I'd just like to know where that lands whenever is convenient.
Okay,
No rush.
sure.
Thank you. All right, I see no more lights. Thank you both very much for coming and speaking with us today, and thank you for all of your great work at the Capitol. It was great to have you as part of our team.
Thank you. Just represent.
Thank
All
you.
right.
We said it's a team effort.
Indeed it is. Thank you very much. All right. Next, we have a update workshop on our bond projects. Ms. Rose, I believe this will be your team.
Thank you and good evening. I'd like to introduce Britton Thomas, our Transportation Engineering Manager, who's going to kick off tonight's presentation.
Welcome, Mr. Thomas.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to present our updates, our second quarter updates on the bond projects in the city. As we know, we have 2 transportation projects and more than a few utility projects, which Mary Stahl will go over. But we'll start with our transportation projects. These 2 projects are getting to an end. Ralston Road is getting to its end, and the construction package number 2 is getting to its end, so we will have an abbreviated update tonight. We'll just talk about budget and schedule for our transportation projects. So jumping right into Ralston Road, Phase 2. This slide will look familiar, just the only change here is the change order number 6, which was approved last week. And so that brings our total budget up to just above $26 million. Moving on, you'll see on the left side, this is our total project budget, again, that $26.1 million. We've spent just about 90% of that, and the construction budget on our right, and we've spent just over 90%, so right in line there. On the bottom, you'll see our timeline. We are expecting to go into warranty within the next month to 2 months on this project, so we will be complete this summer. Upcoming activities, there aren't too many left. Much of the landscaping is installed, a few remaining items there, and a few remaining punch list items. For example, the asphalt, a few landscaping items, like I said, to finish up, and also a few concrete items to finish up. And we'll have our final walkthrough before we go into warranty, and we expect that here in the next month to 2 months. And we'll just jump right into 72nd Avenue. Our budget here, we've spent overall just about 60% of our total budget here. And as you can see, our owner's rep budget and our design budget is nearing its end. As we move into CP3 in the future, we should expect some change orders for our owner's rep, as well as for services during construction from our design consultant. Looking back at construction package number 1, a little bit of retainage left over that we will be returning to our contractors as soon as they ask for it. And construction package number 2, much of what's left here is landscaping involved. Upcoming construction on 72nd Avenue, sprinklers, plantings, and punch list. No major closures are planned. We will have occasional single lane closures to get that final construction finished, but nothing major here. This picture here is the west end of our project looking back east, so right at Swadley Court, and this was the most recent bit of paving to kind of finish up that. Moving on into construction package number 3. Again, this is our underpass. This is the status of our coordination with the railroad. Currently, we are revising plans, both track plans, detour plans, and bridge plans. Those are expected to go back in at the end of this month. And yeah, our consultant has been working very hard to address all of the comments and putting extra effort into diagrams. We actually had an all-day meeting with them just a little less than 2 weeks ago now, just to go through all the comments and make sure they were addressing them and adding extra diagrams and extra information so that we come out of that with much fewer comments than we started. And then as we move through the rest of this year, once we get 100% plans approved, then we'll move on to those agreements after that.
Mr. Thomas,
Mm-hmm.
I understand everything's always in flux, and I really appreciate the team's significant engagement with the railroad in order to keep this moving forward. How confident are we in this timeline?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's, we've in the past thought things would go a whole lot quicker than they have. I think it's a reasonable timeline. Could it continue to push a little bit? I'm sure it can. It is the railroad, and they're generally slow about things. I do think that this next submittal that we have going in is going to be an excellent submittal. So I do expect a whole lot fewer comments, and hopefully no return comments, like previous comments. So I'm expecting good things out of this one. I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
All right. Well, we're rooting for you. Thank you very much.
Mayor Simpson?
Absolutely,
If
Ms.
I could
Gillis.
say we will tap council's support on some of the timelines and making sure the railroad is responsive as you have offered and we have seen helpful in the past.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Gillis.
You all have seen this slide before. This is our spending forecast. We're right where the blue line turns into the dashed blue line. That's where we're at now, and you can see that the spending will be flat for the next better part of a year. That's when we're expecting to, and then that next little bump will be when we can order the major steel components for our bridge. And then as we go into the future, that steeper line is when we get construction kicked off for our CP3. And with that, are there any other questions on these two projects?
I see no lights. Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas.
Okay, just quick takeaways. Again, Ralston Road wrapping up, landscape and punch list left. 72nd Avenue, again, about the same, still landscaping and punch list left. And our next submittal on the bridge going in at the end of June here. And I will say that our drones are back up in the air, and so we have recent drone images if anybody would like to see those.
All right.
And with that, I will turn it over to our utilities team. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Welcome, Ms. Stahl.
Thank you, Britton. Good evening, councilors. I would like to spend some time on this slide rather than glossing over it because the pictures are really fun. That top picture on the Gross Reservoir expansion does not do it justice. The scale is just immense. 4 members of the utility team went and did a tour last week with Denver Water so we could see how our money is being spent. And as I said, the scale is, I've seen the pictures, I've seen the videos. I thought I knew the scale is just truly immense. But they did start placing concrete at the base of the dam a few weeks ago, and they anticipate placing through the fall of this year, placing again next year, and they expect to be done placing concrete next year. The next picture to the right is a maintenance hole. No, it's not very exciting, except it's exciting because no one ever gets to see them. We put them in the ground, and then we backfill them, and then we pave over them, and no one ever sees them. So these were sitting in right next to Danny Kendrick Park, so I took a picture so you can see what a maintenance hole looks like. That's 2 barrel sections, and then the piece behind is the cone section that goes on top. And then the one on the bottom is a very fun success story, and I also want to say thank you for your support on this and explain why I'm saying thank you. The Ralston Water Treatment Plant project is 2 parts, the filters, which we've talked a lot about, and the solids, which no one really talks about. Oh, it's waste, it's solids, whatever. The solids ponds have been challenging for a long, long time out at Ralston. This is the first pond that was completed, and it was put into use as soon as it was completed. It has been filled, and it dried, and it's been emptied. The old ponds took 1 to 2 weeks to empty. The solids were still very wet. They were dry enough to send to landfill, but they were very wet, and we were paying for that hauling and for the weight to the landfill. The new pond took 1 day, and the solids, percent solids is double what it was before. So staff is super excited. Much easier to work with. We are saving money, so much easier. So thank you for your support on the solids project. It's not quite done. It'll be done in about a month, but so far a rousing success. Now to the more boring stuff, I guess.
I just love how excited you are by that.
You know, it's all about water treatment, right? It's just part of it, so.
It is. And also the saving money. That part is exciting too.
Well, and operators are amazing people, and they do such great work, and they don't ever get recognition. So anything we can do to make their lives easier is fantastic.
Absolutely.
So this is the same slide that we've shown in all of these updates, with the exception that the items where we have spent all the bond funds are now grayed out. It doesn't mean that the projects are complete, but we've spent all the bond funds. And just a reminder that there's quite a bit not financed by the bond. On the sewer side, in part because I listed it differently, the programs are not done and the bonds are not fully spent. And again, a reminder that there's quite a bit not financed by the bonds. So on the water projects, again, those where bond funds have been completely spent are grayed out. And then as before, where we've had changes, those are bolded and with a cross out. And I want to talk about those a little bit. So the filter portion of the Ralston Water Treatment Plant work, we found a surprise, and actually I'd like to say one of the surprises is we got more than halfway through the project before we found a major surprise. Given that the plant is 60 years old, with 4 major upgrades and additions since the first construction, I think that's actually pretty remarkable that we got that far. We did run into problems with the third set of filters, and the team has spent better part of 3 months working through that. And the answer is we're actually going to need to rebuild the bottoms versus rehabbing them. That contract will come to council in August, but that will delay the project and push it out. The bold on the 2024 project, there's 2 there. And one of them I wish I could have corrected, but I had to put this in before we got the bid. The 2024 project bids were received on Friday. The engineer's estimate was around $7 million, and we have 2 bids under $6 million. So we have minimum quals and references to check out, but that'll come back down at my next update. It took us a little longer to get that package out the door for bidding, and there's a lot of coordination in that project, and so we decided to give the contractor a full year to get it done. So those 2 things combined can push the end date to July, which then means for the overall water projects is July on bond funding. Again, the graphs that we have shown before. The big takeaway from this one is twofold. One being that dark blue means things are under contract. Everything except the 2024 water line is under contract for bond money. And then the other is that 2025 piece, like I mentioned last time, we're still in that budget process, so that top of that line for what's needed through next year might shift a little bit. Spending and how fast we're spending. You can see the nosedive the filter project took and the flatness of the line right there over this last quarter. That will pick up again in the fall, and 2021 went into construction last week, and as I said, 2024 bid last week, and that will come to you in July. Crossing my fingers, might be the first one in August. And with that, I would like to introduce Kelly Bradley again, who is the program manager for the Central Ralston Trunk.
Welcome, Ms. Bradley.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Kelly Bradley. I'm a utility engineer on Mary's team and one of the program managers for some of the bond projects we have going on. Similar chart that we've seen before, no major updates to this slide in general. CRT 6, the Central Ralston Trunk Line 6 at 69th and Ward is in construction and continues to install the sewer line through there. The Central Ralston Trunk 7 through Davis Lane Park has recently moved to construction just in the past week. They've mobilized into the park and are doing some of the prep work to begin installing the sewer line there shortly. The NTL or North Trunk Line projects, the 3 of those are still in design. As we've mentioned previously, there's a lot of coordination going on those. But the team's working really hard to get those moving forward and into construction shortly. But no major changes on estimated completion dates of those at this time. This slide is very similar to the water slide that Mary went through earlier. Again, no major changes. We do have a little bit more of our projects in design, but they're progressing as we expect, and those detailed designs are coming along, and we will have construction contracts here shortly within the year for all of the North Trunk Line projects. So. And then finally, again, no major changes here. We're still forecasting to spend the $50 million by the end of 2025 on the sewer projects. We'll see those North Trunk Line projects starting and kicking off construction here shortly. So I will pass it back off to Mary. Oh, did we want to talk to you?
I thought we had hidden that slide because we can go through it again, but it's the same slide as last time. Just lots and lots of challenges. So no major updates on the map other than I had a couple of people say it was hard to read the, what I want to call it, like faded out projects that were complete. So I tried putting a gray highlight over them to maybe help make it seem a little easier to read. The major takeaway from this map is really just that we have work across the city. There's no major changes from the last time around. Nothing has completed since then, and nothing has moved from plan to ongoing. And our takeaways, the water projects are in bid and construction, or we have spent the money that the bonds provided. The sanitary sewer projects are in construction and design. It's not the entirety of need. Talk about this every time, and we've talked about it during our budget discussions. And just a quick reminder that implementing the full master plan does require additional revenue to these bonds. Any questions?
I'll open it to council for questions. Councilmember Ferre.
Yes, just one question. When you say that we're saving some money with the waste solids, can you quantify just a range?
I would have to defer to Brad,
Okay.
the water treatment superintendent, but we do pay by weight and we pay for hauling, so the fact that we've removed a whole lot more water should save us money.
Okay, thanks.
I see no more lights. I only had one additional thought. You highlighted in gray, but it kind of matched the unincorporated areas, so it took me a minute to find it. Maybe yellow.
I can try it.
Perfect. Thank you.
The problem is the program I'm using, I can't custom the color. I have to like pick. So,
Okay. Well,
or maybe use a different program. Maybe.
no, I think it's great. Thank you, Ms. Stahl.
Thank you.
All right. I see no other lights from council. So is this all the items we have for this evening's workshop? All right. And with that, I will close this the bonds workshop and open it up to staff updates.
Nothing other than we have a business meeting next Monday.
All right. Ms. Morris?
Nothing from me, Your Honor.
All right. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.